Well, hi, Kat. I'm so excited to have you today on the Seeking Sunshine podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am super excited to dive in and hear all about your story and then talk about your amazing book that you just released.
Yes.
So
Oh my
let's dive in. Let's talk about everything you've been through and how you found sunshine. And I know it's been quite a ride.
quite a ride. Well, sunshine in general or your sunshine podcast?
Just sunshine in general, yeah.
I love that. And you prompted me before we started recording and said, I'm just going to ask, how did you find sunshine? And I love, I can see my Zoom video here, and the sunshine is streaming in right
I
now.
know it's beautiful.
Is beautiful in Teton Valley, Idaho, but it's kind of funny. We were talking about this too, because it's the changing of the seasons and like my fingers are cold. You know what I mean? My
Yeah.
house, I haven't quite turned the heater on. Like it's that in between season. And I feel like your question, how do we find the sunshine even maybe in those dark times, right? Or the challenges? I like to remember that even if we can't see the sun, it's still out there. It's still out there. And I just came back from New York City. I was at a global thought leaders conference, which was incredible with some really incredible people. But I was speaking on emotional intelligence with animals. And one of the things I talked about is that even if your animals aren't with you, energetically, they're still with you. And the truth is, and this is one of the hardest things for animal owners and lovers, and I don't know if you are one, but I'd love to
I
hear.
have two dogs, and one of
Okay.
them's asleep right in front of me.
Okay. Okay. But for a lot of animal owners who have had an animal, loved an animal, and then lost an animal, there's so much grief. And, one of my teaching points is understanding that even if they've crossed over the rainbow bridge, they're actually still with you. They're
Hmm.
actually still with you. And sometimes a conversation that came up earlier for me today is like when someone leaves your life, they create this gap. And I had this incredible interview on my podcast with Michelle Rios, and she talked about losing one of her dogs and how
Mm,
it prepared her heart for the next one. And I feel
beautiful.
like, a part of the sunshine, guess what? The sun is not meant to shine all the time. Like
Hmm.
we're supposed to sleep at night and we're supposed to go through seasons of change where the sun comes out, the leaves change, the sun goes, we sleep, then it's winter and then it's spring. And so there are seasons of growth and then there are seasons where it's not so
Yeah.
fun.
Well,
That's
and
part
the
of it.
truth, the truth is like that love is always there, even when you can't see it. And like the sun, we know like logically that the sun is always shining on some part of our planet, even when we can't physically see it. And so it's so powerful to know that even when you can't feel that love, because sometimes there's just times in our lives when we're like, okay, I just can't feel it right now. And I don't know how religious you are. I wrote a song about this, and in my song, it was like my angry letter to God. I was like, look, sometimes I cannot feel God's love, and that's really hard. And yet at the same time, I know that it's there for me. I
Hmm.
know it's there, and just knowing it's there, and that eventually I will get to the place where I can feel it again. And the same thing's true. Like when you lose a pet, it's like they didn't, that love is always there. It doesn't, it's not gone. Their presence, it's not gone. It still exists even when they're physically not near you anymore.
And I think honestly, sometimes even more so, this is
Yeah.
true. So I'm back in the mountains, raising my kids in the mountains. I'm so excited to be back in the mountains. But, I lived in Chicago for the last 8 years and I birthed both of my children there. And I don't identify as a city person, but the mountains were always there, and the community that I've moved back to, they keep saying it's not the Teton Valley that you left. Everything has changed because in the pandemic, a lot of people flocked
Yeah.
here and it's a different group. But I keep saying, but the mountains are the same. The mountains are still here for
Ooh.
us. If we have that calling, even if we're not there for them, it's still there for us. And it's so cool what you just said about not feeling it, because our podcast mentor, Kathy Heller, who we both know and
Mm-hmm.
love,
Yes.
I was on a call with her yesterday and I said, she's like, where are you at? What do you want to talk about? And I said, what about when you've got so much laundry to do and the kids are and like you're just not feeling it? Like that's where I'm at, and that's where I need to begin with the coaching.
Mm-hmm. The
And she
laundry.
basically, like, she took us, through a process to remember, and what you were just talking about, that even in that moment that we're not feeling it, we are actually feeling something. So like
Yes.
even in the moment where I'm feeling in my fingers, like, my fingers are kind of cold, like, and I know from having been a river guide, when my fingers get cold like this, quick fix, I could start doing some push-ups. You know why? Because you need
Mm,
to be able to feel your paddle.
yeah.
And that's one of the quickest ways to get the blood flow. So like sometimes when we're feeling something negative, or just the reality of what my husband and I refer to as the needful, which is like
Mm,
laundry, kind of has to happen. Like sick kids, got to change your schedule.
yeah.
Like this is just part of life on life's terms. And instead of running away from it and getting into like the great resignation of the reality
Yes.
of like real life, instead, it's the same with pet ownership. Like there's an arc, and sometimes at the end, if your pet has a good long life, the end might be really challenging. Old age for a dog or a pony.
Oh, we're in the middle of that right now. We have a 7-year-old bulldog, and she's peeing all over the house, and it's driving me absolutely freaking
Oh,
bonkers.
and it's so hard because it's like it's so innocent, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
it's affecting all of these
Everything.
things. We went
Mm-hmm.
through this with
Yeah.
our elderly dog for the last 18 months, really.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from like buying pee blankets and having to do this laundry all the time, and then recognizing like this is not sustainable on top of a load of kids laundry, and learning to have like throwaway pee pads, and
Mm.
just changing the way we did things, because we started realizing she'd leak all over the place. We like couldn't find her
Ah.
places enough, so learning to
Mm.
crate her. And this is, again, it's just the natural part of life. Like,
Yeah.
think about our babies. They're peeing all over the place, so we do diapers.
All
And
right.
think about our elderly relatives. All 4 of my grandparents made it into their 90s. Yeah, you better believe diapers become a part of it.
And
It's just part of life.
compassion is so important. Like having that, it's like, oh, she is at that age. Like, and having that perspective is everything. And that's like we're talking about mountains. I happen It's so funny. We live in Utah, and actually we live right next to the mountains. We live right at the foothills, and we spent our summer every morning we would go hike in the mountains because we live like 2 minutes from a trail that just goes right over the mountains, and we get to just walk and just look. And the thing with mountains, and I'm going to say this because I freaking feel like it. Have you looked into human design?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
My thing is mountains. Mountains
Mhm.
is my what's it called? My environment is
Yeah.
mountains. And if that doesn't make any sense to somebody who's listening, I am sorry. I'm so happy if you contact me to tell you all about human design, because I'm kind of obsessed with it right now.
That's amazing.
But my environment is mountains. And at first I was like, no, I wanted to be oceans because I grew up in California near the ocean. But then I realized something, that every time I pictured myself by the ocean, it was never on the beach. It was on a mountain overlooking the ocean. And then I realized that what the mountains bring us is perspective.
Yeah.
It's stepping away from the nitty gritty of daily life. And it's like, oh, now I can just have that calm and that peace of like, life is so much bigger than what I was stuck in for
Yeah.
so long. And so with Dottie is our bulldog's name. And we've only had her for a couple years. So we didn't train her from a puppy, unlike our other dog who's only 2, and we've had him since he was 6 weeks old. And so having not been able to train her since she was little, and it's different. It's
Mm.
different. And so it's like getting used to her behaviors. And it's like, is she peeing all over the place because she wasn't trained well? Or is it because of her age? And we're like, no, this is new.
Yeah.
This is getting worse. This maybe is age. We don't know exactly how old she is.
Mm.
And so it's like, how long do we have left? And how you just watch them. And I didn't grow up with a lot of pets. And so it's kind of a new journey for me. And my husband has a lot of trauma from childhood pets. So it's different for him because he's trying to open his heart again when he's still really actually still healing from that trauma that it still makes him tear up and cry to just to think about. But I love talking about the mountains because perspective is so important.
So important. And I also think, just to bring those two together. So one thing I'm thinking about is like, we're not meant to be on the mountaintop all the time.
Yes, you have to come back to
Right?
real life. You got to fold that laundry. You got to wash those peed on blankets.
Exactly. But it's also like recognizing that there's a time for all things, And so my dog Shadow, we took her out to New Mexico where I grew up. I grew up in Santa Fe most of my younger years. And we took her out there last Christmas. And there's a hike called Sun Mountain. Speaking of Sunshine Podcast, it's this great little, it's pretty vertical, 45 minutes if you're trucking,
Wow.
the super athletes get it done in 30, but it's quite a pitch, right? And it's called Sun Mountain because it's on the east side where the sun rises. And when the sun sets, it's the last one glowing, right? So anyways, she really wanted to take this hike. And at the end, because she knew the hike because she's been there before, right? And at the end, she couldn't quite get up. And I was literally like sort of dragging her and picking her hips up and stuff. And I felt horrible about it. Well, a couple days later, I did the hike again. And she was like, you better believe you are not leaving me here and taking that hike without me. I am going. And the second time, she was so much stronger. And I recognized, and a lot of this is my background as a fitness and nutrition coach and, lifestyle coach is like, if we're not doing the thing becomes harder to do. But the flip side, I've had lots of injuries, my ACL, et cetera, is that it's also a healing journey. So there are going to be times, and this is especially true if you're walking through a grief or a trauma where you may find yourself too close to it at a certain time and need to just take a step back or find a guide or a coach or a healer or therapist, somebody to work with through that. And what I think is so amazing about working with animals is that I really believe they've been called here to support us. That's truly what I believe in: unconditional love, in forgiveness, in all of these nonverbal, like all of this nonverbal communication that's possible. And it's part of why they're meant to journey with us. Like we're not supposed to not connect with our animals. They're meant to live in our homes. We're meant to travel with them. We're meant to hike the mountain with them and see the world also from their perspective, how they see it.
It's so beautiful and it's so innocent. And then there's also, difficulty in it. And it really is. They teach us so much. They really teach us so many things. Like I've seen so much forgiveness come from our pets because I've got 3 kids that have special needs, and so they're not always the nicest to our 2 dogs. And I've got, so our other dog, Fury, is a 2-year-old Australian Shepherd Blue Heeler mix. And he has a hard time being patient with my severely autistic 12-year-old Josh. But Dottie literally will just let him do anything. She's so patient with him and she's so kind. And what's funny is that we got Fury to be trained as a service dog and he just doesn't have the temperament for it. He just doesn't. Whereas Dottie's not quite as smart. She's so stubborn and yet she is patient as can be with him. And it's amazing to see their characters and to see how they interact as members of the family.
Yeah, for sure. I actually was just speaking on this in my talk about the importance of bringing animals into our homes with children because you have real life consequences, and you also see real personalities in animals. And as such, you're able to see and know yourself and learn to adapt or recognize that dog and I, this one's
don't get along. Yep, those two got to keep them apart.
But such a good lesson in acceptance, especially if you're all living together, because there are those moments where you're gonna bump up against each other, and in the real world you're going to have situations that just don't sit well with you, where there's no sunshine. It was a big part of my teaching in New York City, because again, I don't identify as a city person, right? So the only other time I've ever been to the Big Apple, I was 18 years old and I was looking at NYU, not because I had any interest in going there, but because I had a girlfriend who was there and it was kind of the thing to do. I looked at colleges in Boston, again, not really thinking I wanted to go to any of them, but because
There's
my
some
friend,
amazing colleges in Boston, though.
amazing colleges. And I really got the feel in Boston. And I don't know if you've been to Boston and New York.
I have been once. My husband lived there for a couple of years, and so he was showing me around.
Well, I remember getting off the train in New York City, and I swear we pulled into the train station and immediately everybody started getting mean. It was like this vibe of, this sort of puffing up happening, and people started fighting over taking the luggage down. And I remember thinking, I'm a Westerner, with Midwestern and California roots,
Yeah.
why is everybody being so mean? What's the deal? And then I learned, and you grow up, that it's kind of the vibe. That's actually the thing in New York. And another funny thing that happened while I was in New York, one of my cabbies, he was like, "So where are you from?" I'm like, "Okay, what's the tell? How'd you know?" He's like, "Because you're talking to me." Right? And I was like,
Oh,
wow, what a culture of so much busyness, that you don't even see each other, there's
yeah.
no conversation, there's no connection. And I would say, for a lot of animals living in the city, they are having an experience of so much isolation, and they're mirrors for their owners,
Yeah.
so.
Mm.
Okay.
So tell us some of your story, how you what the the prequel to the book, what led to the book.
Oh my gosh, so much I want to say about that, but I forgot to finish the New York City story. So let
Okay.
me just finish. The whole point was, and this is the beginning of the book, is
Yeah.
change your story, change your life. So what I
Yes.
recognized is okay, my narrative about New York City is not serving me. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it's not serving me. So what
Yes.
can I do to show up and find the people who are on the same page as me and who want to connect? I found those people, and I had the most
Hey.
incredible experiences as a result of just saying, as I flew in, I was like, New York City, these people are going to eat me alive. I was like, and you'll appreciate this one as a singer-songwriter. I was like, I am going to sing my song no matter what other people think about it.
I'm gonna sparkle myself all over these people, and they're just gonna have to take it.
This is just it, and not in a way that is gaslighting people, or, but in a way that is just being honest about the gifts I have to give in the world, and how I'm
Yes.
showing up and how I see things. I see things as working out for the best. I got delayed an extra 3 days in New York City. I had so many incredible
So
things
fun.
happen, right?
Yes.
Incredible things that wouldn't have otherwise happened. So just wanted to make sure I finished that story.
Oh, I love that. And it's I think I learned this from Abraham Hicks, who of course I heard about from Kathy. But it's just all of the perspectives are true. It's just which one you decide to look at. And
Mhm.
that's the whole thing with seeking sunshine. It's yeah, the dark clouds are there too. They exist. But if you look at the sunlight, that's gonna make your life so
Yeah.
much happier. So yeah, there's both mean people and happy people. There's both mean people and nice people in New York and everywhere.
Yeah.
But which ones are you looking for? Which ones are
Well,
you noticing?
and I think I'm thinking of that story of two wolves in every man's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you're familiar with that one. And
Yeah.
one is the good wolf, with positive sunshine, everything's going to work out. The other one's the bad wolf, nothing's going to
Yeah.
work, everything's dark, it sucks,
Mm-hmm.
And this is a Native American tale. And so the grandson says, "Well, grandfather, which one wins?" And he says, "Well, the one you feed."
Yeah.
right? So I feel like this is part of, and so the title of my book is The Adventure Paradox. And I'll share the subtitle in a moment, but these are like the great paradoxes of life, you know? So Seattle is known for being rainy, for example, right? I'll never forget being at the biggest bookstore. I think it's called Powell's in Seattle. Huge bookstore. It's like eight floors. It's crazy.
Wow.
And it was a gray day. I'm looking at books, browsing, and then all of a sudden, every single person started moving a certain direction in the store. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, the sun is out. And they were all walking to the side of the building that had windows. And I thought, you know, the great irony, the paradox is you think or would think potentially that people who live in Seattle love the rain. Not so. They love the sun in the same way that people who grew up in the desert, like me, when it rains, the desert sings. People are like, oh, it's raining. You know?
Yeah, you just appreciate it.
You know? So I think, you know, similarly, a big piece of what happened as I wrote the book is that I recognized, and they talk about this a lot in coaching, coach who you were 5 years ago.
Yes.
And this year is the celebration of that story of who I was 5 years ago.
Amazing.
So it's amazing. And I took this epic journey. I know you have it upstairs and you're gonna start.
Yes, I do. I'm so excited to read it.
It's amazing. And I think, you know, for people who don't understand or know too much about me, I think it's important to understand that from a very young age, I was so obsessed with horses. I've always been an animal communicator. You know, for me, my first love has always been horses, but we didn't have horses. We had cats and dogs. And so I learned to communicate with cats and dogs and understand and read their energy. And then I always pursued opportunities to be with horses until eventually I had my own.
And
And
horses are amazing. Like I'm actually not a huge animal person, but my son is. And so we've taken a lot of opportunities to like get him on. My severely autistic son has been like absolutely obsessed since he could even point to anything or like gravitate towards anything. And it's like you can just see that in somebody when like that presence is so calming to them, and it's incredible.
Incredible. And, you know, for me, I've done a lot of research since doing my podcast, but even before that, understanding what is this obsession? What is this connection to horses that some people have? And some people don't have it. They're like,
They're big and scary. Yeah. Okay. I'm one of the people who does not have, but my son does. So I can see the amazing beauty in it because part of it's because he's severely autistic. And so I've seen how it calms him and I've seen how it changes him. And for me, I'm like, they are huge and scary and they make me nervous. But I've seen the incredible way they affect him.
Well, and I think so much of it is, you know, when I take people into working with horses for the first time, or especially if they have a lot of fear, or we were talking earlier about trauma, you know, horses are big enough that they can carry our problems. So whatever we bring to them, they're like, oh, I see you. It's like this, and this. And so it's a great opportunity to level up because the truth is a horse is going to mirror your energy and whatever you're bringing to them. So if you're just bringing to them like, I have no filter and I don't know why I'm here. I'm just here and it's my horse time with you and I love horses and I want you. They're like, cool, I feel that way about you too. You know? But I'll never forget, because I've always felt that way around horses. I'll never forget getting on my horse as I was preparing him to start teaching beginners lessons. And I sat on him bareback and I just energetically sent through my hip bones, through my body, the sensation of fear. Like, I'm terrified to be on you. And I witnessed my horse sending back energetically the feeling of, I think I might need to get you off my back because if you're scared, I'm scared.
Wow.
Right. So the thing is, like, even, you know, it's sort of the fake it till you make it. And we do this as moms all the time. You know, like I had a very scary interaction.
You're okay. You're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I had a very scary interaction with a homeless man, you know, in New York City. And I recognized like, he's in a different state and that's okay. Like I can leave him there and I don't have to take that on. Right. Versus, wow, now I feel like I'm going to go swear at somebody and be aggressive and mean. Right. Like we can filter, and then we can also come back with, I'm going to continue to lead with love. And I talked about this because I tried to give this man a couple of beautiful pieces of bread from Italy that I had left over, but he did not have his hand out asking. And this is like one of the number one lessons is permission. Right? Permission. And the other thing was, again, I don't think he was in the same mental state as I was, and he became very aggressive and expletive. And when you're working with animals, if you start doing that, they're like, okay, I'll back up. Right? They read our energy so fast. So the experience of like writing this book and working with my animals on it and working with my children, because so much of what was going on with me at that time is that I was in postpartum depression. I didn't really know that. Like I kind of knew that, but like basically I just didn't even know who I was anymore. I was pregnant when we moved across the country, and then like one thing after another. I mean, you've got kids. Like suddenly you look at your life from a year before, you're like, I used to like do this on the weekends, and now I like do this all the time.
It's so, I was wondering this. It's like, how much of depression, like, do we spend in denial? Where you're like, no, I'm fine. And then, like, I've had so many questions where I'm like, am I depressed, or did I grow, or did I stop doing things I used to love because I outgrew, or because anyways, keep going.
You're gonna love this one, Karaleigh, and this is on page 47. In the book, but I talk about the 4 questions of the shaman.
Yes. I heard you talk about it on Facebook, actually. Okay. Yeah, because you like did like, okay, keep going.
It was part of the sort of drum roll for the book launch. I shared these 4 because they're the 4 questions. Basically, depression is a stop sign of the soul. Like something's not right at a soul level, and we might see physical manifestations like struggling to get out of bed, not finding pleasure in things you used to find pleasure in, all of those kinds of things, lack of purpose, all of those things. But at the soul level, these 4 questions, I think, are a great way to diagnose, like, where are you really? And more importantly, what are the things that are going to get you back on the pony?
Yay.
Back on the pony. So in my experience, with where I was, all I knew was that I wanted to get back to the mountains, and that my husband was working this corporate job, which was a means to an end, but did not fulfill us, and I think this is a story that's true for so many Americans. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's true over here too. Yeah.
So true. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we were in this, like, keep it up thing. And this is why it was so fascinating, because I actually wrote the book. I said I would write the book in 2018 when we took this big journey, but taking the journey itself was enough. Okay. Yeah. And so many things transpired that I could hardly even talk about it for almost 2 years. And here we are, podcasters. So like you can imagine hardly even being able to talk about it.
You know what? That is one of the biggest things I have learned as a podcaster, is that you have to take the time that it takes to process the thing before you can talk about it. And I've had a lot of people come on my show who are like not ready to talk about it yet. And it's like, you can just feel it in their energy, and it's like, so find a way to like flip the script and find the sunshine in something else that happened earlier that you've already processed, and that will help you as you process this current thing. But wait, just let it simmer.
Well, and I think it's so true. And I remember reading Wild. I don't know if you ever read Wild.
I have not, but is that the one Kathy talked about on her podcast?
Yeah, I think she interviewed Carol Strait.
She did. Totally. Yep.
So she hikes the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yes.
And I think she wrote about it 8 or 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting. I remember hearing, some interviews, and then the movie came out with Reese Witherspoon, all this stuff. And it's like, and I don't drink alcohol anymore, but like a fine wine that like needs to age, or let's say a cheese,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like,
Yep.
if you eat it or drink it too early, it may make you sick. And to go with the sunshine metaphor, it's like you just got a sunburn because of this thing that happened. And it takes some
Yes.
time for it to heal. And not every time someone brings it up, whenever I start my podcast interviews, I'll always ask before we start, like, hey, anything that we need to keep off the table, for example, I'm interviewing some folks who are in film, and they were like, out of respect for the strike, we don't want to
Mm.
talk about these certain things right now. I'm like,
It's
perfect.
really
Thank you for letting
sensitive
me know that.
topic.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for letting me know that. Like, we won't go into that department. So, anyways, I think, for everything, there is a season and a reason. And right now, I feel like I'm at the place where I'm finally able to talk about it. More importantly, I completely let go of shame around my feelings about some of the stories in the book and some of my feelings.
Yes.
And it was so liberating to finally put them out there. And Kathy talks about this, but like, anything you put under the sun will have a shadow.
Yeah.
So, and it's really interesting now, because now a lot of people are coming out and asking me, how did you write the book? How did you become an Amazon bestseller? Like, I want to know your process. And I'm excited because now I can share that process, because now I've done it. Just like now we know how to start a podcast because now we've
Mm-hmm.
done it, right? And so what's so beautiful about it, and what's so interesting, is that it's very easy to put a book out. And again, my book has been out like 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks today. Okay. So let's just make sure for the record that we put that in there.
Well, and by the time this airs, it'll have been out longer and it'll be more of a bestseller and more people will
Right.
have
Right.
heard your wisdom. And
But what's amazing is that the transformation that's already taken place, it's like having a newborn, right? Where you've been
mm,
pregnant, you've been birthing this, you're thinking about having a baby for so long, and like now suddenly you have it, and people
it's
are
here.
calling you. And I say in here, I say, this book is in no small way meant to change your life. And people are reaching out to me, leaving me like 4-minute long voice notes, like, this book is
Ooh.
changing my life, and like all of these things are resonating, and I need to talk to you. I'm like, awesome, great. It is doing what it is meant to do, right? Like, it's serving its purpose, helping people. And at the end of each chapter, I have questions, kind of like the moral of the story, right? For you to get into your own story. Like, where do I do this where I'm people pleasing in my family?
Mm.
Or I'm still waiting as a 40-year-old for my mother and father's approval. Even though I'm saying I don't want their approval, even though I'm saying it
Mm.
doesn't matter, I still
Mm.
actually really want them to be like, good job. You know?
Oh, I bet that hits so close to home for so many people.
Right. And then the other
Oh,
thing that's amazing about it is looking at and considering the perspective not only of my children, but of my animals. And again, I feel like through the writing of the story, I was able to actually see myself in time and space for what I was doing, where it was like, just to finish the story of what we did, we traveled 6,000 miles from Chicago back to Idaho, where we used to live, down to Colorado, and all the way home again on a 40-day odyssey. Okay.
wow.
With 3 horses, a dog, a 6-month-old, a toddler, a nanny, and sometimes my husband, because he was also working this corporate job in
Oh,
India part of the time.
in
So
India?
yes, he had to be in India, which was part of me being like, I don't want to be home, corporate housewifing all through the summer here. Like, this is not my dream. I want to go out to the mountains and connect, with our horses and with our children and with myself in the mountains as a mother.
Yeah.
And it was like the most profound experience, but also, you can go back to your old tribe, but you have changed. And a lot of my friends, they didn't have kids. So reconnecting
Mm.
with them was very, very different. And then my friends who did have kids, but maybe they were out of the house, I never knew them, etc., I could suddenly understand them. They could understand me because they're also moms, and
Yes.
it's like, it can be very challenging, I think, and I'm not saying that we let go of friends who don't have kids. That's not what I'm saying at all. But beginning to understand some of the common feelings, like, I just, I gave my body away. Like, I breastfed, so like, that might be too much information, but like my
No, no
body,
worries.
and I really feel like through the pregnancy, you go through this process of learning your body's not just your own. Like it
Well,
belongs.
and going to the doctor where they're poking and prodding you like through your whole pregnancy, and you're like, and then it's like going in to give birth. And for me, it was like, I'm so glad that you gave me all these drugs so I can't feel your arm halfway up my body right now, because this would be super awkward if I feel that right now.
Right. Well, and I did it with no drugs, and I can tell you that
No, it's all, yeah, I did it with no drugs once, and drugs other times, and I would have given my arm to have had it with drugs that time. So
this is, I've heard many people say that, where they're like, yeah, my first birth experience was like beautiful, water birth, amazing. Hardly felt it the second one. My placenta wouldn't release, and things happened in a home birth without meds that were, I had to do a lot of work around, again, reclaiming my body and my experiences, and also understanding that I was not alone in those. I think that's one of the biggest things. And until we're at a space where we're finally able to talk about it, and not from the space of like, because the burn still hurts, but from the place of, oh man, I've had a really bad sunburn. I feel you. I got you. And let me tell you about the aloe vera and my healing process now. And that I don't go in the sun when it's like full on without sunscreen, like without a hat, without, so I think, and so much of this is what comes with age and experience and wisdom. And it's so much of what I wrote about in the book. So like the subtitle is How to Haul It All, Go Big, and Go Home in Your Relationships. And I feel like so often we just get to that jumping off place of like not understanding why something isn't working and not investing the time to understand how to make it work. And we just quit.
Yeah.
Instead of like recognizing, and I think especially for moms, moms who are like trying to keep the job they had before, trying to keep the body that they had before, trying to keep, again, the relationships that they had before, you are not the same. So learning to understand what I call your haul, which is like, what's all the stuff that you're carrying, carrying a child, especially when they're under the age of 5, especially if they have special needs, right? Carrying an animal, especially if they're having some of the, I call them old lady dog syndrome things.
Yes.
Like suddenly your haul has different things to it. So whatever's going to be big for you will look different. Like getting to the top of the mountain could be extraordinary. It might be a big deal to make it to the first quarter-mile marker. That could be big.
Yep. And appreciating yourself along the whole way, no matter like how, like forgetting the comparisons, because too often we're like, oh, my haul is not big in comparison. It's like, shut that voice up, because it doesn't, like the comparisons do not matter at all. If it feels big to you, you can let it be big. You can let it like appreciate it big, appreciate as big as it feels, and celebrate it in that big way. It's like we need to celebrate ourselves so much more than we do.
Totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think like the last piece of it is home. What does home mean to different people? And for me, finally acknowledging 5 years later, and so this is where I feel like the power of the next chapter. The power is, but often we get really hung up on, look at what I just went through, look at everything I have going on right now. And it's like, I get it. And I get that that's why the idea of, let's just say, for example, moving across the country and starting over in the mountains, right? Where and love the community, the mountains themselves, what people are thinking about, what people are talking about, what people are orienting themselves around, right? And I think so many people, like, this is the great paradox. They're in that space of like, I hate my job. I want to do something else, but I just can't imagine what else I would do because I have all these bills to pay. This is the haul, right? I'm the breadwinner for that would be so big to go do that, right? Without, I'm going to start the side hustle, And I'm not saying that there's any wrong way to do it, but understanding what actually brings you peace? I had the great pleasure of meeting Trent Shelton last week. I don't know if you know who he is, but
Nice.
he's amazing. And he has this tour right now called Your Peace. And so Protect Your Peace is like, I mean, it has so many levels, but just what are the things that really bring you back to center? Like you and I talked about getting to the top of the mountain to have that perspective, but also every day just being able to see them. Like my grandpa, it was March 2020. He was on the runway in Aspen, Colorado. He had a second home there. Okay. He was on the runway. He was supposed to go back to Chicago to the old folks' home that they're in, right? He's in his wheelchair, this caretaker, and he was like, I'm not getting on that plane. I want to die in the mountains. I always feel better in the mountains. And wouldn't you know, he made it, another year, but that was it. And so I recognized, like, what am I waiting for? Am I waiting for someone to die? Am I waiting for my kids to graduate high school? Like, if this is really it for me, where I feel the most at home, the most alive, Kathy Heller talks about that one all the time. Like, what we need is for people to come alive in the things that really excite us, right? So if that's really where I feel at my highest vibration, what am I waiting for? Like, what's with my paradox that we're having this life here and my husband's corporate job ended? Okay. So this was another big piece of it. It was like, now we could go anywhere and do anything.
And we get so bogged down in the like have tos of the like, I'm supposed to do this. I was just okay. I did this yesterday, which okay. So Kathy has been promoting Amy Porterfield's boot camp, and I decided to do her VIP level, and I got to be coached by her, and it was so amazing.
I was there.
So great. And she was like, I had this breakthrough where I was like, and I actually did like a whole solo podcast episode on this where I just like sobbed the whole episode. That was great. Where I was like, I feel like everyone's been telling me that I need to only talk to autism moms and help them and serve them. And I was like, I have had this resistance to that from the moment everyone has said it to me. Like, I just don't want to. And then I was talking it through and I was like, I don't want to. I'm tired of being stuck in this box. I don't want to be an autism mom. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be an autism mom. And it was like, whoa. And then it was like, well, maybe that's why I need to be serving them. Oh, and then I've had this like heavy feeling ever since then of like, oh, I'm supposed to be serving them. And this is why. And then I talked to Amy and she was like, no. Like, no, you don't. Like, if it feels like that and you don't want to, then don't. And I was like, and it was so funny because so many people have told me that they watched that moment and like literally just like watched the like negative energy just like leave me, just watched all this baggage just like disappear from me. And it was just this physical, just like freedom that like took over me of like, hey, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. Like, like what?
Yeah.
Like, hey, and do what you want to do. Don't do the thing that feels sucky and draining and so heavy. Like, how empowering is that for everybody? And it's like, yes, of course we have to pay bills and we have to do the things, but like, there's so many areas in our lives where we have a choice and we're choosing to do the thing we don't want to do because we have this self-imposed have to that we just stuck in there.
Well, and I think so much of it is ego driven, right? And if we really unpack, like, again, that hall of who am I serving? And one of my big ones, I have a huge family. So it's very easy for me to be like, I need to take care of these 35, 40, 50 relatives. And as two of my grandparents passed in the last 5 years, and we had the Zoom funerals, did all the things that most people have been through in the last 5 years, right? I recognized, and I actually went to a really powerful grief, I don't remember what she called herself, coordinator or, mediator or something. But she was like, you can't hold the grief for your entire family to do their grief processing. And I was like, oh, you mean, oh, that's what I've been doing. And oh, that's not my job.
Oh,
It's been fascinating
hmm.
because it's like the peeling back of the onion where you start to recognize how many spaces do I do that in, you know? So like one of my greatest fears on this adventure was that something would happen to one of my animals, our children, you know, our relationship, and I would feel like it was my fault. Something bad would happen because I was the one who took us out on this journey. Right. And the thing is, I'm not going to tell you what happens in the story because there are many breakdowns, you know, where I had to like come up against the wall and really face this fear and also recognize, where do I take responsibility for what could be described as acts of God? As in, I am not in charge of the universe. I am not in charge of the weather, of the sunshine, of the tire on the trailer.
Right. Where are we holding things that we're like actually not remotely responsible for?
And I think one of the biggest ones, you know, coming back to the conversation about depression, and I had this conversation with an ER doc earlier this year because beginning of my podcast, we really did a deep dive into mental health. Speaking of horses, animals, emotional support dogs for mental health, I mean, just incredible movement can happen in spaces where the talking is not happening because the things that are going on are beyond words.
It's energetic.
Completely.
They just hold space, and it's like we got Fury, we got the Australian Shepherd Blue Heeler, we got him to be that, and he's so energetic. It hasn't worked out so well, and yet like my husband occasionally like will take Dottie to work when it's just a lonely day, like a lonely rainy day, and like she's so good at holding space for him to be there. And it was like he said this amazing thing where he was like, I'm not worried about like winter, like the winter blues. What's that called? The winter depression anymore. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I have, you know, a tool now that I didn't realize I had before. And it's like, how powerful is that? It's amazing.
So powerful. Well, and the other thing maybe I'll leave you with, because we've got to wrap up. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
But something I talked about, you know, in my talk last week was like, how many people brought a pet here? Okay, think about 100 years ago. Every single one of us would have gotten here with the help of an animal.
Yeah.
In here by horse and buggy. You know, 1920 was the year that there were more cars on the road than horses. That was 100 years ago. That was not that long ago. So that means that our grandparents, right, were connecting with animals daily for their needs. Yes. They were also connecting with themselves. That meant that they were connecting outside, getting out into nature, right? And so the other thing I talked about is like, our cell phones are incredible, but here we are petting them, talking to them, telling them what to do, right? Like this is sort of our little traveling pet. But the problem with this, as much as it can connect us, like here we are on Zoom, which is so incredible. We can have this incredible connection. We've got these great microphones. We can have great audio quality. Someone else can hear this conversation on the other side of the world in a different time, in a different space. It can take them somewhere. That's so great to connect them to these ideas. But what it's not connecting them to is the heart of another being. Which is what animals do. Have you ever tried to FaceTime with an animal? It doesn't work.
They don't understand it.
I love
do
how,
not
like,
get it.
If you look up videos of like, especially golden retrievers are the best because they're just sort of like, like this is so weird.
I hear something, but I don't know where to look because like, that's not a thing.
Voice, but
there's
like,
no energy there. Like what?
And you know, this is part of why. So I had this doctor ask me at the conference, does it matter what kind of animal you work with? And part of why horses are so incredibly effective is that the bigger the animal, the bigger the magnetic field of their hearts.
That's beautiful.
It's part of why even with dogs, like a small dog versus if you've ever been around big guardian livestock dogs, like Great White Pyrenees or any of those, their hearts are so big. Right? And that does something for us humans. It does something that's beyond words to help take people, I believe, out of that soul sickness, you know. And again, check out the book because I talk about the 4 questions.
Yes, we are absolutely going to do that. So tell us the name of your podcast.
My podcast is also called The Adventure Paradox now.
The Adventure Paradox. Okay, so we've got The Adventure Paradox, the book, and The Adventure Paradox, the podcast by Cat Caldwell Myers. And it's all going to go in the show notes with all of the links. And I'm so excited we got to talk about all this because it's been so incredible. Do you have any final words of wisdom as we wrap up?
I am putting on a fall course and also
Yay!
recording audio for the book for anybody who prefers to listen.
That's amazing. I'm so
yeah.
excited for that.
Yeah, coming in October. And I think, you know, an opportunity for people to get together and discuss some of these ideas and share their own experiences. I've got lots of people like asking, you know, what are next steps? What's happening with this book? And recognize this community is building. So yeah, check out my website for that. You know, all the
Tell
things.
us the website. What's the website?
catcaldwellmyers.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karaleigh. I loved being with you. Such a gift.
You are incredible. Have an amazing, amazing day.
Awesome. You too, love. Thank you so much. Till we meet again on the mountaintop.
Yes. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.